Yo, how's it going everybody? It's me, Arctic. Today's video, we're going to be going over a complete build guide for Kamisato Ayato. We're basically going to be talking about his best weapon choices, his best artifact choices, and generally how to build him and what his kit is definitely going to be centered around. If you are new to my channel, remember to subscribe if you want to keep up to date on Genshin Impact leaks and also build guides for upcoming characters. But anyway, let's get back to the video. So, Kamisato Ayato, he's going to be a sub DPS slash elemental skill DPS type of character. Basically, he's going to end up using his elemental skill to infuse his normal attacks and be able to deal lots amount of damage. He's going to be able to deal quite a bit of damage using his E skill. His E skill does have quite a short duration, so he's not really a main DPS entirely. What his ultimate does is that it's like a sub DPS type of ability, so you're going to be getting some good damage out of that. He comes with a 299 base attack, so right there at 300 pretty much. He ascends with crit damage, so that is a very good stat to have on him, so definitely prioritize crit rate when you are building him. I will talk more about that later. And the second passive right here, if Kamisato Ayato is not on the field, his energy is less than 40%, he will generate 2 energy for himself every second. So that is very, very helpful with his energy recharge, so that's very good because then we don't have to run as much energy recharge, I would say, on Ayato. I think generally around 150, just based on passive from artifacts and that kind of stuff, is gonna definitely be a very solid place to be at, especially if you want to use him very regularly. But yeah, in terms of weapon choice for him, So a few things that we have to actually keep in mind before we select a weapon to use on Kamisato Ayato is that he primarily is actually a kind of a burst DPS, I would say, where my definition of burst DPS is actually where they basically are on the field, use their abilities, and basically get off the field. Ayato is not a main DPS. Now, I'm going to see a lot of people actually trying to use him as a main DPS, and you can kind of do that, but he's kind of a main DPS in the sense of Yoimiya or Tartaglia is a main DPS. Basically, to my point, they are a burst DPS. They do a good amount of damage on their cooldowns and whatever, but once their cooldowns are over, then they basically can't be used, pretty much. Kamisato Ayato does actually have a pretty good sub DPS capabilities with his elemental burst, though, which is going to actually set him apart from some of the characters like Yoimiya, who has an awful elemental burst for sub DPS, actually. In terms of what stats I think are going to be the best for Ayato, we're going to be looking for stuff like crit rate. Crit rate is definitely a big thing considering that he ascends with crit damage. We're going to be looking for crit damage as a substat also, because you can basically balance that out with a crit rate hat, something like that. Energy recharge is also going to be an okay stat to use if you are running him as a sub DPS with a 4-piece emblems build. And then attack percent is also going to factor in pretty nicely, especially with one of the new artifact sets that's actually coming out. The Blackcliff Longsword. This weapon is pretty much a standard whip. You can get this weapon relatively easy from the Star Glitter shop. You just have to save up your wishes and whatnot. And if you are wishing for Ayato, you're probably gonna have enough Star Glitter to get one of these when it comes around. This weapon is honestly a pretty solid choice. It does come with a good high base attack at 565, so that's a pretty good amount of base attack. And also its crit damage substat, it goes up to 36%. And then alongside this, after you're defeating opponents, you're going to gain a 12% attack for 30 seconds and to a maximum of 3 times. So you definitely get a lot of good benefits from this weapon. So I would honestly kind of recommend this if you are going for more of a low-key kind of build on your Ayato. But make sure you do run a crit rate hat or get enough crit rate for your Ayato if you are planning on running one of these type of weapons. The Lion's Roar could potentially work. However, since Kamisato Ayato is actually a Hydro character, he's really going to be applying Pyro off of enemies very fast. So the passive of Lion's Roar isn't going to be able to be procced that often. And he doesn't really have any large hits. Mostly Ayato is a multi-hit kind of character. Another thing is that you could actually use this for the Electro team comps basically, because it also increases versus Electro. So if you're using a Yai Miko as a sub DPS or a Raiden Shogun, something like that, you definitely can get some pretty good damage with this, especially, and actually C6 Fischl would actually be a very good character to pair up with this weapon specifically. This weapon is pretty solid. It does come with attack percent and also a pretty mid base attack right here, so definitely a option to consider. Special Sword is an option that we don't necessarily know if it's going to work yet, but if it is actually able to reset the cooldown of Ayato's E skill, that could actually be pretty huge, considering that this would pretty much give him almost constant uptime, I would say, on his ability. Base stats are a little bit low if you are going for like a main DPS kind of build on him, but if you're able to actually like re-trigger his elemental skill, which I highly doubt, be a solid option if you are planning on going for like uptime on his elemental skill. The black sword is the battle pass sword and it's probably going to be one of the better options as a low spender. It's going to be really nice because it does give you that nice crit rate, so it gives you 27% crit rate. It has a pretty mid base attack at 510. On this also increases the normal and charge attack damage by 20%, which is actually really good on Ayato because most of his damage is coming from his normal attacks. He regenerates 60% of your attack as HP when you use normal and charge attacks, so that's really good especially if you don't want to run like a healer type of character on your team. Now getting into the 5-star options. First up, the Aquila Favonia. This weapon could potentially be good on Ayato just considering that it does come with attack percent. So it's going to be pretty solid, especially if you are pairing it with like his normal attack artifact set that is going to be releasing in 2.6, which basically converts like attack into like a little bit of extra like normal attack damage, so could actually be pretty good. It does have a very nice high base attack at 674, so attack percent is going to actually factor in quite a bit, and it does actually come with physical damage bonus, which is going to be good if you are using Ayato as like a on-field main DPS, which I don't know why you would do that. But outside of his elemental skill, he is going to be getting that extra like boost to physical damage. Passive on this also triggers like a little Falcon of the West that deals damage once you get hit, so can actually be pretty solid. So the Skyward Blade is actually going to be a solid option if you are going for a sub DPS build, I would say, on Ayato. And just generally overall, I think this weapon is going to be pretty good on Ayato. Comes with a mid base attack for the 5 stars at 608. And then it comes with energy recharges as a substat, so it's going to be very nice if you are running like a 4-piece emblem build on him. Passive on this increases your crit rate by 4%, which isn't really that much, but if you are stacking a bunch more of like artifact substats, you can potentially get a pretty good solid amount of crit rate from this. But the real main thing that I want to talk about by using this weapon is it actually gains you your Sky Piercing Might upon casting your Elemental Burst, which increases your movement speed by 10% and also increases your attack speed by 10%. So that's going to actually affect his normal attack speed, so you're going to be able to get a little bit more normal attacks off within his elemental skill. So your normal and charge attack hits are going to deal an extra damage instance of like 20% of your attack, but sadly that is actually going to be physical damage. It's not going to be infused with like a Hydra, I don't believe. The Summit Shaper weapon could potentially be good if you're going for like a lot of attack on your Ayato. This gives you 49% attack percent, so that's definitely very high. And then if you are using it with like a Zhongli or other shielding characters, it's going to increase like your shield strength, and also hitting enemies is actually going to increase your attack percent also by quite a bit amount. So I kind of would recommend this weapon to test out on Ayato. Steel Jade Cutter is an excellent option to actually use on Ayato, considering that he also does have some HP scaling with some of his kit in terms of like damage bonuses, so that's going to actually factor in quite a bit from its HP substat. The weapon does have a 542 base attack, so it's honestly like running a 4-star weapon as a base attack, but it makes up for that with its high amount of crit rate, so it gets 44% crit rate, which is actually a lot of crit rate. Part of this passive, it basically converts your max HP into an attack bonus, so kind of can benefit you a little bit from that as well. The Mist Splitter Reforged is a great option to use on him, considering that it does increase your elemental damage bonus by 12%, and then also whenever you're going to be using these different abilities, you're going to get different stacks. Normal attack to an opponent, you're going to get one of these stacks. And then if you cast your Elemental Burst, the stack's going to last 10 seconds. And also, if your energy is less than 100%, your stack is going to, you're going to get a stack of this also. So that's a lot of elemental damage bonus that you're actually going to be able to get. It does have a high base attack at 674, and it comes with crit damage as a substat. But once again, make sure to run a crit rate hat, or make sure you have enough crit rate to basically like utilize this weapon. And then last but not least, Kamisato Ayato's best in slot weapon, actually his signature weapon. It's going to be very similar to the Mist Splitters Reforged, but instead of crit damage, it's going to give you crit rate. The crit rate goes up to, I think, like 34%, I'm pretty sure. It has a 608 base attack, and also you're going to be getting 12% all elemental damage bonus. And then when nearby party members' normal attacks hit opponents, the character equipping this weapon will gain a stack of Wave Spike, and you get a maximum of 5 stacks of this, triggered every 0.3 seconds. When the character equipping this weapon uses an elemental skill, all stacks of Wave Spike will be consumed to gain Rippling Upheaval, which will basically increase your normal attack damage by 8% for 8 seconds per stack that you actually consumed. 5, that's 40%, so honestly that actually totals out to be a little bit more than the Mistsplitters or Forged, but you are kind of losing out on that like crit damage. So honestly, I don't really know which one of those two weapons is going to be better, but this one is definitely focused around Ayato's kit. So a few things that we have to keep in mind before we actually select our artifacts for Ayato is, one, that his E skill is on kind of a short-ish duration, meaning that like his Hydro Infusion it only lasts like a certain bit of time, so he doesn't have constant uptime on his Hydro Infusion, which is a little bit sad. It makes it to where you can't necessarily use him as a complete main DPS. You'd pretty much have to use him as like a burst DPS, which in that kind of definition, I'm going for more of the like, oh yeah, you have him on the field for a little bit, do his stuff, activate his abilities, and then kind of swap off. That's what I consider burst DPSs. But then he can also probably be built as a sub DPS, considering that his elemental burst is actually a pretty solid elemental burst. It does have a pretty high energy cost, but if you're running him basically as a sub DPS, I think you could get around that with some certain things that I'm going to be talking about. I'm only going to be covering the artifact sets that are actually viable on Ayato. I'll be covering every single artifact that is actually in the game, but there might be some things that I missed, so if there is, just leave a comment down below and I will get to it. The first artifact set that I want to look at is going to be the Gladiators Finale. Now this one is actually going to be a pretty okay option to actually start with, because it does have an 18% attack bonus, which is going to be pretty good because Ayato does have some pretty good usability with like high attack percentage and whatnot. Like having a good amount of attack on him is definitely going to be very beneficial. Also, the 4-piece bonus, if the wielder of the artifact set uses a sword, claymore, or a polearm, it's going to increase their normal attack damage by 35%. And since most of Ayato's damage is from normal attacks, this could be potentially an okay 4-piece set to go with. Next set that I want to talk about is actually the Thundering Fury set. And now you're probably wondering, why would I choose this set? And the reason is because of the 4-piece bonus of this, because it actually decreases the elemental skill cooldown. So in theory, if you wanted to actually use his elemental skill a whole lot more and basically get more uptime with his Hydro Infusion, this is a potential option. Now the reason why I say potential option is because there's definitely very much better options to go for if you're trying to go for damage, but if you're trying to go for like a gameplay loop, this potentially might actually fit pretty well if you are going for like characters like Yae Miko. Also, Yae Miko could be a potentially good character to run with this, or like Raiden Shogun is actually going to be pretty good because Raiden kind of is a burst DPS in herself also, where her burst basically gives her that infusion of electro damage for like quite a little bit, and so I think this definitely could be beneficial. Plus, you can like trigger this off the field, I'm pretty sure. The next set I'm going to talk about is the Blizzard Strayer set. And now you're probably wondering why I would actually choose this. And the reason behind this is because since Kamisato Ayato is a Hydro character, if you run like cryo supports or something, you're going to actually be able to get that increased crit rate on the frozen enemies or enemies affected by cryo. But if you're hitting them with like Hydra, they're going to be infused anyway. A thing that I'm actually kind of interested in seeing if people are going to actually do this is if they're going to run like Shenhe and like Chongyun as supports for Kamisato Ayato. Because Ayato has kind of a sub DPS and like burst support, I would say, with this set, just getting that extra cryo crit rate. Really, I think Ayaka is going to be a little bit better than Ayato in that comp, and that's just because Ayaka is actually a cryo character and basically can utilize Shenhe the whole entire time. But it's still an interesting and possibly viable option. Just make sure you have like a cryo support that's going to be running with this. And the Heart of Death set is probably actually the best set to go for Ayato if you're currently like pre-farming, I would say, because it does give you like a 15% Hydro damage bonus, which is beneficial to like his whole kit. And also the 4-piece, it's increasing your normal attack and charge attack damage by 30% after you use your elemental skill. So this is honestly a pretty solid option. And you're pretty much going to have constant uptime on this because like his elemental skill cooldown, it's going to be like triggering like not too often, but like often enough that this is going to stay pretty much active. So this set is probably going to be pretty good for like main DPS Ayato, even though that's not really his like main selling point, I would say. But just in general on Ayato, I think this is going to be a pretty solid option. The Shimano's Reminiscence set, this set has potential to be okay, but only really if you're going for like normal attack damage, I would say. You get like 50% off of this, but then you run the risk of like sapping your like elemental burst energy. Goes down by like 15 every time you cast your elemental skill, which doesn't seem like too much. but it's really gonna offset your like energy cost and energy gains. So I wouldn't really recommend this set too much. Severed Fate set I think is probably gonna be his best overall set for sub DPS because it does come with energy recharge at 20% right here. So that's gonna already be boosting up your burst uptime. I would say you basically can sap up your burst all the way to full a lot faster. Plus, if you're running a whole bunch of energy recharge on Ayato, you're gonna be getting that 25% extra elemental. You're gonna be getting like 25% of your energy recharge converted to elemental burst damage, and that can go up to 75%. So 75% burst damage is quite a lot. So this is definitely a very good sub DPS option. The last set that I'm gonna talk about is actually the Echoes of an Offering set. And this is actually the new set that's going to be dropping in 2.6. You can't pre-farm this because it is going to be a new artifact set, but this I think is probably going to be like Ayato's best in slot set. Because increased normal attack damage. Normal attacks have like a 36% chance to trigger like an extra amount of attack. It basically increases your normal attack damage by 60% of your attack. If you're running a large amount of attack percent on your Ayato, you're going to get a lot of benefit from this. Trigger, you're going to be getting that 20% chance to increase it, so it's going to go up to like 56% and then 76% and then like I think 96%. So yeah, it's going to trigger pretty fast, especially since Ayato actually like attacks pretty fast also. That's about it for the video. Let me know if you guys liked it down in the comment section below. And anyway, it's been me, Arctic. I'll see you guys in the next one. Farewell.